This is Tangled, an animated movie that came out in 2012. It costs about $250 million to make and stands today as the most expensive cartoon ever made. That's more expensive than Black Panther, Fast and Furious 9 and Transformers: The Last Knight. But how do we get here? Well, let's take a look. You may be wondering, what even is a cartoon? Well, a cartoon is a series of drawings in a sequence made to perform actions for entertainment. So now that you know what a cartoon is, let's see where it all began. With fantastic glory. It is said by many to be the first fully animated work ever, and it was created in France by Émile Cohl for the Gaumont Company in 1908. This short film illustrates many scenes in a short 1 minute and 40-second runtime, such as the stick man interacting with many objects and he himself turning into various objects, like a flower, a cannon, and later on, even an elephant. But let's be real here. In this day and age of animation, something like this wouldn't even catch the eyes of the most impressionable fans. But back when it came out, this thing was groundbreaking. And for you to understand how much effort went into creating this piece, here are a few details. This short animation took around 5 months to create, and about 700 individually hand-drawn images. -1 drawings were made for each second, but because they were photographed twice and displayed twice, this gave the film a 16 frame per second look. And I'm assuming this was done to make it longer and to look more solid. But I know nothing about animation, so please take it with a pinch of salt. But I hope this gives you a better idea of the early days of animation work. These were known as the Silent Ages, where there was no sound, no CGI, or the ability to copy and paste images, which used up a lot of time and energy. For even the short pieces of work, this small but important step in animation set the tone of what was to come. And some popular cartoons that were released during this time include: from the Silent Ages, we were pushed into the golden age of animation. This was the period from the 1920s to the 1960s, and is regarded as the peak of animation, as it set the foundation for everything we have now. The Golden Age saw the production of cartoons for the big screen, as people were gravitating from watching live action plays in cartoonish shorts to fully animated movies. And this is where giants like Walt Disney, the Warner Brothers, and MGM entered the picture. This era basically started when someone had the unique idea to add sound to cartoons, something that had not even been thought of up to this point, and the revelation was a game changer. The best example of this is Steamboat Willie, which was released by Disney on November 18, 1928. It was one of the first cartoons to match its animation with a soundtrack. It was so integral to the evolution of cartoons that it was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry for being deemed culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. And alongside the addition of sound, someone said, "Hey, why don't we add color to this?" And as such, color became part of animation. And color did come before sound, arriving in 1918 for the first time. But in the early 1930s, we were blessed with Technicolor 3-color that ultimately created full-color images on the screen, resulting in beautiful, colored movies for us to enjoy. Feature-length films also became a staple on this period, and this was when the general public was introduced to the potential and the entertainment level of cartoons on the big screen. And the biggest contributor to the success of animation during this time, in my opinion, was arguably Walt Disney. Whether you hate him or you love him, for some of the things he's done, he paved the way for animation to become what it is. He also released a plethora of movies and shorts that generated so much respect, money, and admiration for cartoons as a whole. Cartoons that were made at this point include: Why Don't You Give My Video a Like? So at this point, animation was on a roll. Disney was releasing hit after hit after hit, and the general public had taken a liking to cartoons. People would flock in their numbers to the nearest theater to see the latest cartoon movies. And all in all, everything was great. So, what could possibly go wrong? Cue the Dark Ages. It all started as Carsons were making the transition from the big screens to the small screens of millions of people in the comfort of their homes. This caused an increase in the demand for cartoons, and thus the Dark Ages began. You see, most cartoons at this point were either short, animated pieces that were shown in theaters before the main release, or one-off feature-length movies to be enjoyed in the same movie theaters. But since people now had the luxury of watching cartoons at home, they need to go all the way to a theater to watch a movie was becoming a thing of the past. Plus, demand for good quality cartoons on a regular basis skyrocketed. But at the time, animators just couldn't keep up with this demand, so this resulted in the creation of limited animation. To sort of calm down the pressure, limited animation was an animation style that used as few frames as possible, and this resulted in cartoons looking blocky and clunky with their movements. As you know, the more frames a cartoon has, the smoother it looks. But this was the only way to turn out as many cartoons fast enough to meet the growing demands. And you may think that this was just a lazy approach by animators, but this was likely the best they could do. Under those circumstances, budget constraints were also placed on them. Without the adequate resources that they had in this day and age, they just had to do with what they had. And that led to a lot of low-quality shows. We tried to use dialogue to make up for the poor animation coming out. Others used limited animation to cut corners because it ended up saving them a lot of money, which they then used to develop other stuff. That was very bad. It didn't help that powerhouses like MGM, that's the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Company, and the United Productions of America, UPA, shut down their animation studios because animation was becoming very expensive and the returns were very low. This was coupled with the fact that a lot of other animation companies were facing legal troubles from parents, because now that animation was being shown in everyday households. Parents became very conscious of the type of content that their kids were consuming, and since animation wasn't all that child-friendly and it was filled with so many toy commercials, most of what was being shown wasn't liked by the parents, and this resulted in censorship like it had never been seen before. All seemed lost for animation, and the state of it sunk lower than it ever had before. Public cartoons, though, at this time included. And if you have made it this far, why don't you consider subscribing for more videos like these to come straight to your subbox? Coming off the devastating effects of the Dark Ages, animation was at an all-time low. TV screens were full of low-quality animations with above-average dialogue to try and make amends. This seems to have put the spark back in creators, as animators were back with a vengeance to gain their lost artistic respect. Throughout the 80s, though, most of the shows on air were still limited animations from the previous era. But getting to the end of it, you could tell something big was on the horizon. Companies started to invest more and prioritize their animation departments. And what was the result of this? You may be asking. Well, let me give you a peek at the greatness that was made during this era. This is what happened when animation was giving respect. And the front runner of this, coming to no one's surprise, was Disney. They had experienced a big slump in the past few decades, but all of this was starting to turn around. The release of The Adventures of Gummy Bears in 1985. What followed was DuckTales and Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers in 1987. And because of how big these shows became, Disney got their own dedicated block of television, Disney Afternoon. And as such, Disney had found their footing. Other companies like Warner Brothers also sensed what was going on and developed their own original shows, with Tiny Toon Adventures and Animaniacs paving the way. Nickelodeon and Cartoon came into existence around this time and started rerunning cartoons. They eventually went on to develop their own cartoons, which I will get into later on, so keep on watching the video. But the biggest change that was happening in the industry was a change to computer-generated images. Before now, most animated works were made with cel and ink and paint. But a digital revolution made the use of computers for animating easier, with CGI animators had a more affordable option of producing cartoons with not as much work. Disney eventually caught onto this and implemented it into some of their biggest works till this day, such as The Stampede from The Lion King. Rest in peace to Mufasa. Pixar then started their trend of producing masterpieces by creating the first ever fully CGI film in 1995. That is Toy Story, which just sends cartoons up. No pun intended. Pixar liked the amount of hype and success that this movie generated was crazy. This set the bar and became the yardstick for cartoons to come, because now the sky wasn't the limit, but it was just the beginning, and animation was going where it had never gone before. All of this brought us to the modern era, or the millennium era, and this is where we currently are. If you want to experience it, go switch on the TV, and that's it for the video. Don't forget to subscribe. The culmination of everything that has ever happened. The world of animation. The traditional the animation styles that were being used were ditched for flash animation and CGI. These new styles of animation became the status quo in the industry, as animators were now fully using new technology to develop cartoons. In addition, cartoons as a whole became a more diverse genre, with more and more categories being made to meet the variety of interests we have now. The infiltration of anime into the West around this time also influenced a lot of shows, as some cartoons would pick aspects from Japanese animation, ranging from the art style to the overarch and plots. That's why we had shows that focus more on establishing world with a deep story and lore over the episodic cartoons of the past. Understandably, these shows became hits, growing some of the most dedicated fan bases we had seen in media. I'm looking at you, Avatar: The Last Airbender. Another category that took off in animation was adult cartoons. And this was content that was catered to older audience who would appreciate adult tropes and topics in a comedic or mild manner. The Simpsons, arguably the biggest and the longest-running adult animated show on air, brought this category to the limelight by showing audience that it was possible to use cartoons to make shows that were more adult-oriented. Soon enough, shows such as Family Guy's Future Amafold and Fast Forward to today, an adult animation is bigger than ever before. But some of the biggest cartoons belonging to this bracket? Finally, we can talk about the place where most people first came into contact with their favorite cartoons. Since we associate them with their respective channels, networks used to supply the majority of people the taste of the best animation that we had to offer. And we had the biggest networks fighting each other for viewers' attention. And this led to the creation of some of the best shows ever seen on TV. Today at the top of the pyramid was the first Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon, who definitely formed their childhoods of many of the people out there. Some even watching this video coming in. Right behind them was Disney XD, which picked up more steam in the 2010s with a series of great releases. More networks which have not been forgotten include Boomerang, Disney Channel, Adult Swim, and the rest. But the most recent development has seen Tours on demand streaming services, which provide individuals with a plethora of animated shows ready to be binged, with Netflix, Amazon Prime, and Disney Plus leading the charge to great cartoons available at our fingertips. All in all, cartoons have definitely come a long way, from the individual hand-drawn images on paper to computer-generated images we see on our TVs, which have become the normal today. And in my opinion, the millennium era is definitely the best. But if you do share a different opinion, let me know in the comments. Also tell me which era you think has been the most influential, and what do you think is the next big development for animation. If you want to see a video where I go into types of animation in detail, such as 2D animation, 3D animation, stop-motion animation, definitely leave a like and tell me in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to share with your friends and cartoon lovers everywhere, and I'll see you next time. Tune out.